Hello and welcome to HD Philosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to awaken the hidden dragon within all of you. And this is episode 2 of the Gospel Meditations. And this week we're going to be exploring Exodus 16 as it moves into and is fulfilled in Joshua 5:12.
Let's go!
Now, this was the sermon discussed this week by Pastor TJ Gorum. And we're going to examine what he talks about when he compares the wilderness to the promised land. So without further ado, Exodus 16, 1 through 4. And they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they departed from the land of Egypt. Then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I might test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily." Then fast forward to Joshua 5:12, where they finally come to the promised land. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. So what we have in Exodus is the Israelites complaining that they actually had things better in Egypt. And what's so fascinating about that is I take that as wherever you are, you can definitely make it worse, you know? Think about Job, when everything was going wrong, when everything was turning against Job. And even Job's wife is like, you have nothing left but to curse the Lord that put you in this place. And Job is like, I'm not going to do that, because things can always get worse. It's like that's that last vestige of hope right there. If I just say that all of this turmoil, all of this suffering is for nothing, then I'm turning against God and I'm saying that there is no goodness in the world. And when I'm reading Exodus here, I can't help but see that even though they have been freed, they're in the desert now. It's like they knew what they were in Egypt, even though they were slaves. And here, they're actually pining for the lash. They're pining for the servitude. And I think a lot of us don't understand that sometimes freedom is worse than the tyranny. At least in the tyranny, you're being told what to do. But in freedom, there may be too many options. So people actually enjoy the tyranny at some level because it's giving them an idea of where they are. To quote Leonardo DiCaprio in Gangs of New York, sometimes the dragon's wings are very warm. There's something about being comfortable with the devil rather than the endless sea or desert of possibilities. Now, the way Pastor TJ Gorum went is he started talking about the difference between the wilderness and the promised land. Because sometimes the solution is the right solution, but it's just at the wrong time. So on Monday through Friday, they're told to gather, but they're told they're not allowed to keep anything. And still, some of the Israelites disobey that order. And as you can imagine, because Exodus kind of opened with them thinking about what was going on in Egypt, one has to imagine that the reason that they couldn't do that is because probably they were used to holding on to their food while they were in Egypt. So finally they have food, and it's like they cannot do away with the habit of keeping the food overnight, of which, God gets extremely angry. So there is this idea that the solutions they had in Egypt to keep themselves fed are not the solutions that work out here in the desert. And what's even more fascinating is the rules from Monday through Friday aren't the rules on Saturday. They're able to gather twice as much and keep it. So the solutions from Monday through Friday are not the same solutions on Saturday. And as a father, this really brings to mind that sometimes the solution in the moment is the right solution, but at the wrong time. I think about this when I have to decide whether to be more disciplined with my children or to give them some leeway. One solution isn't always the right solution for every time. I can remember an example when my daughter came home and she threw her bag, and the rule was you're supposed to hang up your bag before you jump into bed, or you do whatever you do for the rest of the day. So as soon as you come home, you're supposed to hang your backpack. And what was fascinating is I could tell she was having a really difficult day. So the part of me that would have hearkened on the solution of follow the law, I looked at her and I was like, oh, what's going on? And, I found out she had a bad day. But in that instance, it was almost like the good superseded the right, to borrow the verbiage from W.D. Ross, the good and the right. So sometimes the solution is the right solution for a particular time, but isn't the right solution for the time that you're in. So then it begs the question then, how do we discover the right time? When is the right time for the appropriate solution? And I just remember like these two aunties that I had as I was growing up that had just two different styles with me. One of the aunties was much more stern, when I would make a mistake, it was much more like, well, what did you learn, boy? And things like that. The other auntie was always like, oh, poor thing. So I would think about it and I would be like, when is the right time? When is the time that I need the sternness? And when is the time that I need a little bit of grace, And I think about this kind of in more of a Taoist nature of the yin and the yang. Sometimes you're in the season of yin, sometimes you're in the season of yang. But the wisdom is finding out what is the right solution for the right time. And if you see the yin and yang in Taoism, you notice it's a constant pull back and forth. And it's the constant pull back and forth that informs you that you need to be able to work both sides, or both sides need to be in some kind of harmony in order to discover the solution. This is kind of what I see with what's going on with the left and the right now in politics. And I don't get very political, and this is just political in theory. We are a strong country when we have both the left and the right participating, because sometimes the left is according with the right solution. But, other times the right has the correct solution. But how do we find out what is the right solution for the time? Well, in Taoism and for my two aunties and parenting as a whole, it's when both sides communicate to one another. I can't tell you how many times where my wife and I would talk about this. I would have one way that I think we should move with my son or my daughter, and she would have another way, and we would talk about it. Oh, well, was this done last time? What's the severity of it? I'm searching for the fake cry. She's trying to figure out if this is the time for more grace. Think about our justice system and the faith that we put in such deliberation. We gather 12 jurors, 12 strangers, and we tell them, listen to the evidence of both sides, and then they're sequestered, and they dialogue and they discuss with one another and argue with one another, all trying to figure out what is the correct solution for the correct time. And something beautiful happens. They get it right more often than they get it wrong. Something fantastic happens when people are gathered and they're told to seek justice, seek out something, and talk with one another and find the solution. This also reminds me of the Wasson test that's supposed to demonstrate that the right answer is found out more often than not when it's more than one person deliberating on the possibilities. It's a classic cognitive psychology experiment that measures confirmation bias. I mean, check it out when you folks have the time here. But I'm just taken back to what is said in the Bible. Matthew 18:20, where it said, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am with them. There's something so special when we are communicating together to find a solution. It's like the solution, the truth is there. but we need that communication, which means the more the left and the right can't have the conversation, the less often we're going to be able to find what is this right solution for the right time. So that's kind of my addition to what was discussed that week. But I have to give Pastor TJ Gorum some props here, because where he took this was much more of the wilderness versus the promised land. Because like I said before, in Joshua 5:12, they actually get to the promised land. And the manna ceased and they had to till the land. So the wilderness is when God was producing the manna and we were very dependent upon him for sustenance. And in the promised land, they have to cultivate the land kind of with God. But in the promised land, there's much more independence. And I think also about like Exodus 7, where Moses is a messenger of God to Pharaoh, but it's God who is raining down and punishing Pharaoh. But in Exodus 17, Moses is praying to God to help fight the Amalekites, but it is the Israelites fighting the Amalekites. And as Moses keeps his hands up, they continue to win the war. So it's much more independent, not totally independent, but much more independent. Now, what's fascinating is like my daughter even asked, she was like, well, why is that the promised land? I feel like the wilderness better resembles the promised land, And it was such an innocent question. I just love her for this, because this is the mind of a child, right? She's looking at it in that way. And it's like, well, God is taking care of them. With the manna, wouldn't that be the promised land? And I was like, no, sweetheart, because the whole aspect of us as human beings is that we get to participate. We have the grace and the blessing to participate in the acts of God. So God in Exodus 6:4-5, God was nourishing his people. And in the promised land, we get to cultivate the earth and we get to participate in that nourishment, The farmers get to nourish the people and get that feeling of being able to take care of people. And it's feelings that I get as a father, I'll be damned if I let anybody else take care of my children. I was going to make sure I provided for them. And that is such a blessing to be able to do that, and I do thank God for providing me with the mind and the physical capability to take care of them, both in a scholarly way or just working my butt off as a mechanic, as a carpenter, maintenance. I was in the labor industry for most of my time, and like I said, I thank God that he gave me the gift of power to be able to lift and do those things. So I was able to provide them in that way. And shout out to Theology of the Body. Maybe that'll be something I discuss another time, but that's the inevitability. And that's kind of what the promised land is, where we get to start participating in those divine acts, And I think about that kind of as I spoke last week, when it comes to the intention. A moral individual is actually one who gets to choose, not one who is forced into the decision. In here, we get to participate in that fatherhood, in that leadership, by being able to take care of our people, like Jesus being a shepherd to his flock. So I hope you enjoyed it. That's kind of what the discussion was this week. A lot of deep meditation in the Gospels. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
The champions of this battle are... These extras are killing me. This is so annoying. Got it. We'll murder everyone. I won't lose to anyone.
Thank you for watching HD Philosophy. Like, share, and subscribe.